Hi there guys, I'm just going to make a little tutorial with you today on how to make a really simple travel journal. I'm using this download pack that I got from a really good friend of mine who designs packs. I had it sitting on my desk because she sent it to me and I'd had it printed off, so I decided I was going to use this for this project because it was there and it was the perfect theme, perfect size. But you can use any scrapbook paper whatsoever, any images in your stash. There is no specific thing in this pack that was for this journal. I just used a download pack and made it work for me. As you can see, it's a really cute pack and there was lots of elements in it that just spoke to me. I'm obsessed with toadstools, so that little one in the corner, I'll be using that on my toadstool journal that I'm making. The reason I picked this pack to do this is because these pages here, I'd printed them off smaller than obviously my printer paper, and I decided that was like the perfect size for a little travel journal. That was the inspiration for this project, I guess, just the sizes of this little fold in half page. And that's pretty much the only reason other than laziness that I decided I was going to use a download pack. So if you're using scrapbook paper or salvage paper or paper you've made yourself, the first thing you're going to need is one that is thick enough to be a cover. This one here with the fox is the one I'm going to be using. I have had this printed on 300 GCM satin cardstock, so it's quite thick. I get my downloads that I have printed professionally by a local company that only charges like 20 to 30 pence a sheet, so it's cheaper than me buying printer ink when I want to print a whole bunch of like downloads. So whatever your scrapbook paper is or whatever paper you're using, you want to cut yourself a front cover piece which is roughly about the size of 2 4x6 photos side by side, so it would be 8x6 I think in inches. So yeah, you want to cut out yourself a little cover. The size doesn't really matter, make this any size that you want to. I'm just going with this size because this is how I got them printed, and to me this is the perfect little travel journal size. So your front cover is probably the only part of this that needs to be quite thick cardstock. The rest is purely up to you, but as I've printed all of these on the same cardstock, most of it will be used in thick card. I'm really crap at cutting. I've said this in a previous video, so excuse me for taking 3 years to cut this out. Okay doke, so we have my cover here, and I'm going to score it in roughly the center. Because this already has a pattern on it, I'm going to go by the score line that's on this, but obviously you want to measure your bit of paper, find the center, and you don't need a scoreboard. You can just fold it in half, join the edges together to meet them up and give it a wee fold over. And as you can see, because mine wasn't completely centered, it has this little extra white bit, so I'm actually going to trim that off and just make it all neat real quick. I am literally the world's worst at cutting with scissors, cutting with blades, cutting with rulers, so I saved you the pain of watching me make an utter mess of that. Okay, so my cover front and back matches up nice and even now, even though you can see I've got a little bit of a straggly edge there. You missed the drama of me cutting a straight line is all I'm saying. So to make this cover a little bit thicker, I was considering backing it with another of the pages, but it seemed a little bit too thick because it's already quite a thick cardstock. So I'm going to line the inside of my cover with just a piece of tea dyed paper. I was figuring out if I wanted this lined stuff. Nope, I think it's just not quite right. I also want one that's going to cover both pages. Now you can do this with absolutely any interior paper, book pages, tea stained pages, whatever. Now I'm just trying out these glue sticks, these Yoo-hoo sticks. I don't normally glue pages in with this glue stick. This is the first time I've actually tried it, but I figured I would give it a go. You go ahead and use whatever method you normally stick large sheets of paper together, and you're going to stick your interior paper onto your cover just to make it as pretty on the inside as it's going to be on the outside. This will also add a little bit of strength to your paper. I'm just putting it on one half first because that way the glue doesn't dry out too quickly while you're gluing up the other side. Now with this Yoo-Hoo glue, I didn't realise that it's actually kind of wet, like it takes a while to dry. So later on when I'm doing this cover, there is a stage where I should have let my cover dry completely before continuing, but I wanted to get this video done. So don't be like me. If you use a glue stick, let it dry completely so your paper's nice and crisp. This is forewarning for what will come ahead. So I'm smoothing out my paper, and once I'm happy it's all glued down, I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to trim around it and get it back to the size of my cover. So I'm just going to cut around it. Okay, so at this point it's curling up a little bit. That's just because the Yoo-Hoo glue stick is quite moist and my paper is a little bit soggy. I should have laid it under some books and left it to dry, but I'm an impatient woman and I never like leaving things to dry. So I've just refolded it there just to bring the crease back into the center. And now we're going to move on. Oh, sorry, I decided that I was going to cut my edges into curves. Now you don't need to do this if you don't like the curved look, and if you don't have a punch, just use a coin or a bottle lid to draw a little guide on the edge of your pages and just cut them out with scissors. You don't need any fancy tools to make a curved edge. I just think it looks somehow nicer. And then I'm going to take my ink, and my favorite color for doing this is Vintage Photo. I can see a little bit of the paper sticking out. And I'm going to take Vintage Photo and just ink the edges to cover up all the white card on show that's been exposed by trimming this. I also like giving a little bit of an edge, a dirty edge to all my things. I'm into very grungy. That's why I really liked this pack. When she said, do I want a copy of it? It's because it's such a grungy sort of light academia feel to it, which is very me. Okay, so once I have done the inside, I fold it in half and also do the edge, because if card can have a tendency to crack when you fold it, and that'll just cover that up. And then just on the inside too, just to catch any little bits that I missed. Okay, so now that I've done that, once again, I should have put it under something to let it dry and flatten out, but you know, we shall move swiftly on. Now I'm going to go back to the papers that I put aside, and I'm going to select one that I think goes with the cover, but that can be used for the inner pocket. I just want a really simple little place to stash some cards. So I figured this one would look nice. I'm just going to cut a little strip off it, and I think it'll look pretty cool on the inside. It kind of goes with the tea stain paper too. Now for this, you can use any cardstock, any scrapbook paper. It doesn't even need to be that thick. This is just going to be a little insert place for little cards. I'm using this one because I really liked it, but I could have done it with a tea stain paper and made it all cohesive. So I'm going to cut myself a strip, and once again I'm just eyeballing this. I'm not going with any particular size. You cut a strip that goes with the size of travel book that you have made, how deep you want your little insert to be. I just generally don't make them that thick, that wide, because I find they're much easier to slide cards in and out of if they're not too deep. Okay, so I've got my strip, and I'm hoping it was straight. And it is a little bit longer than my actual cover, because I've used another one of these like book pieces that was a little bit bigger. And I'm going to decide which parts of the card I want actually on show, which bit is going to get trimmed off. I don't know what that black thing is. It keeps coming back to haunt me throughout this video. So I'm just trying to decide which bit of the card I'm keeping before I decide where to fold it. So I decided I was going to take it to that edge, and then I'm just going to fold it in half. I'm going to stick it inside my cover, and then I'm going to use that as a guide to trim it. So just lining it up where the fold is, thinking, yeah, that looks good. And then I'm going to stick it back in there, fold it over with it in place, and then I'm going to trim the excess off. Now you can do this after you glue it in place, but I wanted to ink all the edges, so I needed it cut to size. This is why you don't really need a set size for your journal, because you're making everything fit as you go, so it doesn't need to be a specific size. You can make this any size whatsoever. So I'm going to ink all the edges, cover up the white cuts. It just, to me, makes it look more finished all the way around. And then when I've done that, I'm going to fold it the opposite way and do that center bit too. It's just a little detail that I like to do when I'm making things like this. Okay, so to adhere this, I'm going to use my 3-in-1 trusty glue. It's a bit like Fabri-Tac. It's pretty strong and it's quick grabbing. So at this point, my cover is still slightly damp from the Yoo-Hoo glue, just to be warned. Still foreshadowing why it's important that you let your stuff dry before you continue. But yeah, we'll come to that soon enough. So as you can see, I'm just putting a beaded glue around the bottom edge, up the sides and up each side of the fold in the middle, and I'm going to lay this in place and adhere it nicely. I'm going to line it up with the bottom of the notebook, and while it's still wet, I'm also going to fold it and just make sure it's right in place where it needs to be, push it in if needs be. Now you don't have to just glue this. Normally I'm somebody that puts things on my sewing machine and stitches around for extra strength, but I wanted this to be a really simple, easy to do notebook. So I'm going to ink all the edges again, just to settle into the cover any little gaps that were left from not meeting the edges properly. I'll just cover that up a little bit by adding extra ink. Now as I was doing that, I realised that I want to ink the entirety of the edges again, because I didn't really have much of an edge. I am a sucker for the grungy look, what can I say? So I'm just adding that all the way around. You don't need to do this if your preference is clean, non-grungy, non-vintage. You don't need to do any of this. You can have it nice and clean. Okay. So once that is done, I'm going to run some ink up the middle too. I should have done that before, but it is what it is. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to work on what it is that I'm going to put inside the cover of my journal. So I'm going back to these, and I really like this little card thing here. I think this would be a good spot for any little card like this. Just in my head, in a travel journal, when you open up the inside, there's always a little spot to put your name and address, just in case you lose it in your travels. So to me, that's what this little card is. It's just a little spot to put your name and address. So you could use anything. You could create a little card from your own stash, just a little vintage piece of scrap paper, just anything. This is your journal. You can make it any way you wish. So I'm just going to cut this out. I'm going to ink the edges. I mean, this technically saved me from making a little embellishment from scratch, which I normally would do for a journal. Okay, so I'm inking the edges because whenever I do a project, I find that whatever colour of ink you're going to use in your project, if you cohesively use it on all your elements, it'll tie it in together at the end. So that one's going to get glued in there, but I also want a little card insert just to put in. So these little two pockets are good places for tickets, postcards, those kind of things if you've gone away on a little trip. So I'm going to use this little one here that's on the corner of this page. This was the same page that I made the strip from. And to me it looks like a little vintage postcard image. I think it's actually a picture of buildings or a city. So to me, that is my idea of a travel postcard. I'm going to cut it out, ink the edges, and that's going to be a little insert into this travel journal. You could use an actual postcard or any little images. I'm going to round the corners just because I'm making it like a full postcard. I'm just trying to make this basic and quick so it's easy for somebody to sort of do this with their own stash. I'm going to ink this up. Now a little trick I'm going to show you here is if, like me, you're somebody that likes tea stained and grungy and you're using a printout like this and you turn it over and it's completely white on the back. I don't think I do it here, I think I do it later. I'm going to come back to the back of that card and I'm going to ink it using the vintage photo completely, and I'm going to show you how I do that so it doesn't look too patchy. I'm just going to glue this in place. I'm just sticking with my 3-in-1 craft glue here because at this point I feel like the Yoo-Hoo paper, the Yoo-Hoo glue still has the paper feeling quite damp, and I wasn't too keen on that because, you know, damp paper is never great to work with. It makes it a little bit more fragile. So I've just gone back to my trusty 3-in-1 glue. Okay, so I'm going to stick that down to the inner spot of my journal. Get it the right way up, that's a good start. So yeah, that is where I'm going to put my name and address in case I ever drop it on my travels outside of my house and lose it. Okay, so my postcard, as you can see, nicely slides in there. It all looks very nice together, nice and cohesive. Okay, now we're going to make the inner pages while that dries a bit more. I'm going to put this aside and I'm going to put it underneath something heavy to flatten it out and just stop it from curling while I'm doing the inner pages. Now this roll of paper here, this is just Amazon packaging. When you buy anything from Amazon and they chuck in that big screwed up wad of paper, that is what this is. So I'm just going to fold it in half, sort of the width of my book, and cut myself some folded strips. I can get 2 pages per strip, so I'm going to cut them out. I'm going to use the whole roll and I'm going to make myself some book pages. Okay, so I think I got 8 pages out of that roll of paper. So I've made them kind of huge just now because I am going to see how small I want them to be. I want them slightly smaller than my book so that they don't stick out the edges. So I'm just going to take a pencil here and I'm going to lay them inside my book, just shy of the edge. So you can see I'm going to straighten up first. I'm going to leave a little gap around both the edges of the book, like so, and then mark it on the other side, leaving myself another little gap. So I do the same at the edge, stop short, and then I'm going to trim it to fit inside. I'm going to do it with all 8 pages. Okay, so now I've trimmed them all. That would have been a boring process for you to watch. I'm just going to show you here, don't throw away the strips. This paper is actually really good for using in paper mache. I made book covers using paper mache, just glued in layers. It makes for a really thick, strong paper, so you can use the strips for that. I'm going to layer them inside each other and make one signature. It's only 8 pages, so one signature is fine. And because they were all measured to the exact same size, what's going to happen when you layer them up like this is the signature is no longer going to be even on the ends. When you layer up books like this, I'm going to show you the center pushes out the middle pages. So you can leave it like that if you don't mind it, but I like to trim it down and make them all even again. So I'm going to get my ruler and a knife and I'm just going to trim them all down and make them nice and straight. We all know I can't cut straight to save myself, so I hid that little portion of the video. So as you can see, they fit inside without anything sticking out at any edge. So now I'm going to get a little pokey tool here. This is a very sharp, I think they're called awls or all. I can't even say that word. Excuse the accent, it's an all. I'm going to line up my paper. Now this is the point at which the disaster happens. My book cover is still wet, so when I'm poking through, not only is there more resistance because I'm pushing through damp paper, but I'm going to get a little bit of blowout on my paper from my pokey tool, which would not happen if it was completely dry. It does get a little bit worse when I'm threading these papers together, but it is what it is. I should have let it dry. So you're going to make 3 holes, one in the center, and then you're going to half from the middle to the end and place another hole in that center, so you end up with 3 holes, if that makes sense. I know I'm not explaining it, but as you can see, I have 3 holes, one in the middle and then 2 on the outers. And you're going to get a length of string or embroidery thread, or whatever it is that you use to make book signatures. You can even use wool. I'm using this green, dark green, sort of slightly grungy string. I think it's garden string actually. I'm not actually sure what it is. And I'm going to use a wool needle. There we go. So I'm going to take myself a length of this string, and I'm going to cut it and thread it on my needle. Now don't worry, this is not a finished, once I add these pages in, this isn't the end of the journal. We've still got a little bit of work to do. Okay, you're going to go through the middle from the inside to out. It's a little bit tough because my paper's still damp, and you're going to leave yourself a substantial length there, like so. You're going to come in through one of the outer holes, like so. I'm fighting with this damp paper, and then you're going to go past the middle to the other outer hole and go back out again. And watch me struggle. See, you can see I'm ripping up my paper. Then you're going to go back in the center, but you're going to make sure that you're on the other side of your little bit of string that is in there. So you've got one end coming up one end of it and one end coming up the other side of it. So you're trapping that long length between them, and then you're going to tie it just in a knot. And that's a simple way to adhere a signature. I don't know what that is called in terms of book binding, but it's one of the simplest, easiest methods. Now, as you can see, I had a lot of blowout, and that is purely because of damp paper. Let it dry, folks. Don't be me. Don't be impatient. Okay, so you've got your signature in there. Now we're going to go back to finishing off our little book with a couple of little details. First being, I want to make a bookmark, which will be this one. Now you can use any scrapbook paper, you can use bookmarks that you've previously made, you can use actual bookmarks. It's just going to be an extra little detail. I'm just moving that to the front because I thought it looked lost in the back. So this one is also already the right size. I was also noticing on this sheet, it's actually a thing that you can make. It's you cut it out, back it together, cut out those slits and put those little ephemera cards into them, which is really cute. But I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to be doing my own thing. That was me just figuring it out, being like, I never knew this was on here. I'm also going to take this little card because I want it to be another little slip in my thing, in my journal. So I'm going to cut out my little extra card here. I just thought it was really cute and went with the journal. And we all like little extra places for writing things, notes and sentiments. So the more things to slide into my pockets, the better. Obviously, you can put whatever you want in your travel journal. I think doing one that was travel themed and putting some tickets in there and some postcards would be really cool. So I was just checking the size of this, and it's not that much bigger than the travel journal size. It's just a tiny bit bigger, so I'm happy with it. I'm going to glue on some of my lined paper to the back because even though it's a bookmark, it's also a journaling spot. So having some lines on the back, I can write my favourite quotes. You could keep a list of all the places you've visited while you've been using this journal. So like a little tick list of all the places you went, and then in the journal itself you'll have the pages holding the memories of those places. And I'm going to cut it out. Okay, so once I have cut this out, like a slow person who has no ability with their hands, as you can see, it too is curling up. And I do like the Yoo-Hoo glue, it adheres pretty well. I just don't like the fact you have to let it dry and wait for it. But apart from that, I like it. I'm going to put a little hole in this using a punch, if I can figure out which end is the right side, because this is going to be a bookmark stroke tag. You'll see why once we get to assembling it. And I'm going to ink the edges too once. I'm just checking the length to see that the top sticks out without also sticking out at the bottom. And then I'm going to ink my edges just to make everything cohesive. Everything has the same colour ink on it. Everything is done with the same kind of style. I mean, that may not be your preferred. You may be eclectic and like a journal full of random different patterns and different styles and colours, and that's totally your thing. This is just something you can customise to your own way. You don't need to do it like I'm doing it. Okay, so once I have inked all the edges of this, slowly, is watching someone ink a bit like watching paint dry? Is it boring or is it interesting? I can never tell. See, I quite like watching somebody inking something, but I don't know if other people do. Maybe it's just one of those things. So I've done with that anyway. And I'm going to take a length of the same green string, but I'm going to give myself quite a decent length. I want it to hang down on the outside of my book. I'm going to loop it in half, put it through from the back, and then pull the ends through that loop. And there we go, we've got 2 bits of string that's going to hang down the outside of the book, like so. And the reason is that I want to put beads on the edges of these. Now, I'm not sure which beads at this point. I think I have a little look here and realise I've got such a large bead stash that it's going to take a while to find some. So I'm just going to show you with a random bead how that's going to look. I think I actually pick a random bead which doesn't even match, but I just was having a problem finding a bead. Okay, so I'm also going to ink the edges of this little card. Now, here's a little trick. If someone like me, you like using tea stained and the back of your card is white, this was the tip. Go around your edges first in quite a heavy-handed way. So you're inking the edge, getting all those white cuts. It's hard to show on this little card. It kind of covers the whole thing just by going around the edges. So I'm going to show you on the larger card how I make it look kind of decent. So you want to go around the edges first. I was trying to be light-handed here because I didn't really want to make it very dark. But as you can see, the edges are looking a little bit patchy compared to the inner white. So what you do is you go around all the edges first with a slightly heavier hand, and then go around in a circle, getting gentler and gentler as you get to the middle. It will fade it out, take away that white stark, and it won't look very patchy. It makes it look aged instead of crisp white. Okay, so I'm going to put my little cards in there, looking cute. Got our bookmark in place. Ignore that I've not got any beads on it yet. So now we're going to make a closure, but I'm going to show, I blew out that paper, so I'm going to cover it up by just pushing the paper back in with my ink pad, so it will take away the stark whiteness of it, and it'll also push some of that paper back in. But like I said, if you had let your paper dry, you shouldn't experience that problem, and never ever have it happen with dry paper. Okay, so now our book needs a closure. We've got everything else going here. We've got a nice bookmark that we can move around as we are filling our journal. I don't know why my hands were having problems, working. Sometimes that is just what happens. And you've got our little space there to put whatever, postcards, notes. But we need a closure. So one of the simplest, easiest ways to make a closure for something small like this, I'm going to use one of these little cards again. They're the perfect size for this. And this is something I do with journals that are not really going to get really thick and padded with lots of stuff being stuck inside. I'm going to cut out this little card, and as you can see, folded in half, it comfortably sits around the book with quite a bit spare, and I can make it loose so that a little bit of extra width will still close even on this journal. So I'm going to cut it out. So you need basically a strip about this size, but once again, this is personal preference. It does not need to be this size. And like before, I am going to, oh, in fact, I'm not going to do it yet. I'm going to show you. You need a couple of these little paper clips. What are they called? I'm not actually sure what they're called. Stud fasteners. And a punch that is bigger than the head of the stud fastener. So the head of it should be smaller than the hole that you create. You're going to punch a hole on one side. And then you're going to just put a little hole in the other side, sort of around about where I'm doing it. As you can see, I'm giving myself quite a decent edge, so it's not too close to the edge so it won't rip. Then you're going to ink up all your edges, but you also want to pay attention to the back of this because the back will be seen. So if you're inking up, or if you're using double-sided scrap paper, or if you simply just want to glue on another paper to the inside before you put the holes in it. So then you're going to fold it in half, like so. You're going to go to your journal cover and you're going to lay it on where it's going to sit. Now leave it hanging off the edge a little bit. That's just to accommodate the journal getting a bit fatter as it's used. And you're going to mark the center of that hole. And you're going to push a hole through, like so. I'm going to remove my cards before I stab them. You're going to put in a stud fastener. And open up the pins. Now you can hide the back of these stud fasteners with a little bit glued over them, a little bit of fabric, a little bit paper, a little sticker. I don't mind them, so I'm not going to bother. So your hole should fit over it and easily come off again, like so. That's going to be one part of the closure. So while it's hooked on there, you're going to put it on the back and mark a little hole. Then you're going to unhook it, keeping that in place. And you're going to push the hole through just your back cover and your closure. And then you're also going to glue the back one. That's just for extra stability so that it will not rip off if you're not using it a lot. Then you're going to take your stud fastener, put it through the little hole that you've made, put it through the hole in the back of the book to find its position, and then stick it down with the glue and open the stud fastener. And as long as your hole is bigger than your stud head, you should be able to close over it like so, and it will stay. And to open it, you just push it off again. So the edge should slide just under the stud fastener, and then to get it off, you just slide it back out and take it off. And it's a really simple closure. And now we're going to put the beads on. We're going to finish this off because it doesn't really need much decoration because I've got such a nice image on the front, but you can decorate, like I can say here, you can cover them up. I don't mind them. I kind of like that look. I'm not giving this to somebody that's going to cut themselves on a stud fastener. It's just for me. So yeah, I'm going to add my beads here. As you can see, I just tied knots at the ends and knots above the beads so they don't move around. So that bookmark also acts as decoration, and that is the end of it. Just a simple little travel journal that did not take very much time, and you can make it in any way that you see fit. I'm trying to find something to fit into the back pocket here and realize everything I have is way bigger. Bear with me, I find something small enough. There we go. It's my little foxy girl. She's a part of my artwork. But there we go. There is a simple travel journal using Amazon packaging and just some papers that was already on my desk. And it's a cute little thing you can slip in a bag and go off for a little adventure. So if you make this, don't forget to show me. I would love to see it, and I'll catch you in the next video.